Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Sauga 960. You know, I have a desire to bring you interviews with some interesting business people, and I've met someone who I think is an interesting business person. He also has an incredible philanthropic side, and so I thought it would be a fascinating opportunity to find out why this guy, number one, created such a successful business, and number two, has this desire to contribute to philanthropic efforts to such a great degree. Mark Halpern is his name. He's a certified financial planner. He's a trust and estate practitioner. He's a master financial advisor, and he's a philanthropic individual that has helped businesses, entrepreneurs, owners, professionals, and affluent families for almost 30 years. As CEO of WealthInsurance.com, Mark and his team provide tax advantages finance solutions to protect families and their businesses, working closely with accountants, lawyers, bankers, and other financial professionals to provide comprehensive estate planning solutions for their clients. Widely known for his philanthropic activities, Mark is chair of the Professional Advisory Committee of the Jewish Foundation of Greater Toronto and a trustee and a member of the Sick Kids Foundation Professional Advisors Council, the Promise Legacy Council at St. Joseph Hospital Foundation, the Allied Professional Network at Markham Stouffville Hospital Foundation, the Toronto Estate Planning Council, the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, and the Canadian Association of Gift Planners and CALU, C-A-L-U. Mark's corporate goal is to create $100,000 of $100 million of new philanthropy annually, working with clients, generous donors at not-for-profits, allied professionals in their fields of law, accounting, insurance, and investment management. Outside of business, Mark is the president of, how do I pronounce this? Aish Hatorah, Toronto, and teaches leadership and business ethic courses to students and professionals. Mark, that's a pretty impressive resume, sir.
Wow, I'm impressed. You know what? I'm just going to sit back and listen to me talk because, you know, there's clearly a lot of good intel there. Thanks, Brian.
There is a lot of good intel in your resume and in your background. So tell me, how'd you get into the insurance business?
It's a good question. I've been in professional practice for 30 years, but my real start in this business was 47 years ago, actually this past March the 8th. And that's when my father of blessed memory died of a heart attack at the age of 50. I was 11 and I was the youngest of 4 boys. And my mother, who was 48 at the time, had to go back to work to support our family. The reason is my father was a busy engineer. And unfortunately, he didn't have a will. He had very little savings and there was no life insurance. So it was very hard for us growing up. But fast forward, I now work with some of the most successful business owners and entrepreneurs and wealthy families in Canada. And you'd think they'd have it all together. But I would say, not, Brian, I'd suggest 80% of the time it's not true. They're so busy looking after their staff and their contractors and their suppliers. When it comes to themselves, they have a massive amount of incompletions because they haven't really spent the time to do that. So really, we built up our practice to work with people in sort of 3 different areas. One is in estate planning. The second area is in tax minimization strategies. And the third is philanthropy. And it's been very, very rewarding to help lots of people along the way.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to get into some of your philanthropic efforts in one of our later segments, but just from an overview standpoint, why get involved in philanthropy to such a great extent?
Well, you know, I think it's part of your DNA. We grew up in a very philanthropic family. My mother, even though she was a widow, you know, when the Cancer Society came by, they would always collect those $5, you know, the with the flower, what was it, the daffodil program, you know. So we were always involved with philanthropy. And then I found out by going forward, like I was very much involved with a lot of nonprofit volunteer work. And then I got into an industry in the financial services where I realized we could be really the masters of change. Like we're the gatekeepers to our clients' wealth. And there are ways for them to create philanthropy and enduring legacies, often by converting taxes into charity. And nobody's really talking to them about it. So it gives me a lot of pleasure being able to, you know, educate and provide wisdom and knowledge, not only to clients and to nonprofits that we work with, but also working with allied professionals, lawyers, accountants, bankers, insurance investment people. You know, once they hear this story, it's incredible how inspired they get and say, Mark, let's talk to clients about this and see if we can do something cool.
Convert taxes into charities. What do you mean by that?
Well, every one of us has 3 possible beneficiaries to our estate, right? You've got family, you've got the tax department, and you've got charity. And each of us can pick two of those. Which two would you pick, Brian?
Family and charities.
Well, most people would take family and charity. So there's a way with proper planning to be able to be remembered for leaving a lot of money to charity and not writing a big check to the tax department. So from a very basic level, there's actually a return on investment when it comes to giving money to charity. For depending on what tax bracket you're in, for every $2 that you give to charity, you save $1 of tax. So $2 you give to charity, you save $1 of tax. So
I thought charitable deduction was far smaller than that. We're going to have to delve into this and understand this in greater detail after a message. We're going to take a break and come back with Mark Halpern in just a minute, where we're going to turn really into a good discussion. We're going to turn to a really good discussion of how you can turn your tax dollars into charitable donations. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Sauga 960. We're chatting tonight with Mark Halpern, who is head of an organization called Wealth. What is it? Wealth Insurance?
WealthInsurance.com.
WealthInsurance.com. And he's in the insurance, estate planning, and tax minimization strategies. And Mark, we've just been talking about how to turn tax dollars into charity. And what you had said is that for every $2 that you give to charity, you can keep $1 away from tax, reducing your tax. How do you do that?
Correct. So let's just say, again, it all depends on your tax bracket, your marginal tax rates, et cetera. So I'm sort of looking at things from the highest tax bracket. But let's just say somebody knew that this April they had a tax bill of $25,000 as an example. So back in the fall, if they're of a charitable nature, imagine they had $50,000 sitting around. Again, everybody's not so fortunate to have that, but let's say they wanted to establish a foundation for their family. They could donate that $50,000, get a charitable receipt for $50,000, and that would offset 75% of their tax bill. Whatever was not used of the 75% could be carried forward for up to 5 years. So as an example, I'll tell you that most people in Canada, Brian, or when they do give money to charity, they give cash or checks or credit cards. Would you say that's true, Brian?
Yep.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's the most inefficient way to give money to charity, because if you're giving away $1,000, you have to make $2,000 to have $1,000 left over in order to give to charity to save $500. But there are ways that the government has mandated to make it easier for people to give money to charities today at a loss to them. And one of those is that everyone has some appreciated securities, Brian. Let's say it's a mutual fund, a stock, an ETF, a segregated fund. When you have that stock and it goes up in value, and I'm not talking about registered money, I'm talking about non-registered money. When you buy it and you sell it, whatever you made on that money, you basically have to give about 25% of that to the government. That's called capital gains taxes. So if you had 100,000 and it's now grown to $200,000, so $25,000 will be taxed going to the government when you sell those securities. But the government says you can actually donate those appreciated securities to charity. You get a full tax receipt for the donation of the market value, and you pay no capital gains taxes. So you basically saved $25,000 of tax and now created an amount of money that could go to a charity directly, or you could set up your own family foundation, either setting one up on your own or piggybacking on a community foundation.
So if you donate an appreciated asset to a charity, you do not get charged any capital gains tax.
Correct. That's on securities. That's not on real estate, and that's not on business assets. That's on securities. So that would be stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, segregated funds.
If you're ever going to give any money, instead of cash, give an appreciated security so you don't have to pay the capital gains.
Correct. I'm dealing with a lady who has, she's 80 years old. She has $5 million of appreciated security. She's quite good at her investing. And the cost was $1 million. Her cost base was $1 million. So it's grown by $4 million. I mean, she's 80. She's done very well. But really, she's not worth $5 million. She's only worth $4 million because when she sells that stock or when she dies, the government's going to take a quarter of the growth of those securities. So if somebody's charitable, now's the time to start thinking or planning on how can I instead let that tax go to a charity I care about or I'm passionate about, as opposed to letting it go to the tax department.
Okay, and when you donate those securities, you also get you get out of the capital gains tax, but you also get a charitable deduction?
You get a charitable receipt for the full amount. So getting back to that example I mentioned, if in April you knew you had a $25,000 tax bill, well, before the year ended, like September, October, November, December, if you had $50,000 in appreciated securities, much better if you're charitable to give that to a charitable foundation that you set up or directly to a charity, in which case it'll offset 75% of your tax bill that's going to be due in April. So you've converted taxes into charity. Now, of course,
the charitable deduction was a far lower percentage than 75%.
Well, it's not. It's the tax bill is 50% of the gain, right? Whatever the capital gain is, and if your marginal tax rate, let's say, is at 50%, so that works out to a 25% tax approximately. It's about 26% actually.
So, sorry, I was talking about this the foundation idea. So, in the foundation idea, you're doing something with 50,000. You're putting $50,000 into a foundation.
Yep.
And saying that that's going to offset 75% of the $25,000 tax bill.
Correct. And whatever is not used can be carried forward for the next 5 years. So you're going to use the full bill. You're going to use the full tax advantage, partially for this year and partially for the year following.
So 75% of $25,000 is $20,000. And so you're saying that on a $50,000 donation, you get a $20,000 tax deduction.
Correct. The tax savings. And you can carry forward the additional $5,000 for the following year.
So you're not saving money, but you're certainly not paying the money to you're not paying the money to the government. You're paying it to charity instead.
Correct. Now in Mississauga, I believe that's where most of your listeners are, right?
Across the GTA.
Okay. Well, there are community foundations. There's the Mississauga Community Foundation, the Toronto Foundation, the Jewish Foundation, the Oakville Foundation, the Barrie Foundation. They're actually these wonderful organizations that your listeners should learn about, but they're kind of like an umbrella. They're a charitable foundation, and they allow you to put your own foundation underneath them. It's called either a named foundation or a donor advised fund. And it's a wonderful way to arrange or organize legacy planning for your family, or to do some of these strategies that we're speaking about.
Right. Mark, I've heard that you've been quoted saying that income taxes are voluntary in Canada. Can you explain that?
Well, again, that comes back to the idea that we just had in terms of let's say there's a $25,000 tax. We work with estates that are much more significant than that. But again, you do have a tax bill. It's not going to be wiped out. That's completely true, right? In terms of your year-to-year tax bill, you can mitigate it with charitable donations or with RSPs, right? Or some flow-throughs or other strategies as well. But one way that we see a lot of our families do it is they'll go ahead and give money to charity if they have the cash sitting around, or securities, or let's say they've sold a business or they've sold some real estate. So they don't want to pay that tax bill. Now that money will have turned into charity, but now the family's out of pocket, right? They're out of pocket in terms of the donation that they gave to the charity. So often what we'll do is we'll use tax exempt insurance strategies to get that money back into the hands of the family. It's going to be a timing issue. Clearly, those people have to wait till they die until the money comes back. But in other words, they've been able to convert taxes into charity, get the money back into the hands of their family, and create a wonderful legacy for their family. So again, there's no cookie cutter here, Brian. Each situation is unique, and people have to look at their overall planning to see how this might fit in.
I understand you also said that the government discriminates against people who are single, widowed, and divorced. Can you explain that?
Yeah, in Canada, if you have a spouse and you die, everything, all your assets roll over to your surviving spouse tax-free through something called a spousal tax-free rollover. But on the second to die of a husband and wife, the government considers as if you've sold everything at market value at that point, and they have their hand out wanting your successful, investments. So again, if you have any marketable securities, non-registered or appreciated investment real estate, or a business that's appreciated, the government's going to want about 26% of the gains there. If you have any registered money, an RSP or a RIF, and you have no spouse, the government's going to take 54% of that money. And if you have money sitting inside of a holding company, let's say you have an operating company, you have a holding company, there could be a taxation there of anywhere between 47 and 70% of that money going to the government without proper planning. So the lovely part about my business, Brian, is when I meet a family that's worth, let's say $50 million, and they're feeling pretty comfortable with that kind of number, when you've done the planning and you've let them know that they're only worth $38 million, it gets their attention. And that's where the planning comes in now, where we can look at things like never spend money that you're just paying taxes on, and we can use that to preserve your estate for your family or do some charitable activities as well.
Sounds like you should just get married to someone else on your deathbed.
Well, you know what? After people get married once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I've heard everything, Brian. I've heard, yeah, just get married so that the money rolls over. Again, that might make your kids a little unhappy. And we see the biggest growth in the legal world is in estate litigation. And it's for that reason, just like you're mentioning, Brian, that people sort of want to try to do something to help their families. But in the end, the lawyers are going to get involved. And that's why these things have to be really buttoned down.
So there is a tax-free rollover of all your assets to your spouse, but not to your children.
Correct. Everything is considered as if it was sold at market value upon the death of that's why I mentioned about being single or widowed or divorced. They're one instant away from a very, very large tax disposition. And it's remarkable how many people in Canada who have RSPs, which is a large amount of money, right? And it turns into a RIF when they turn 71 and they're widowed. They don't realize that 54% of that money is going to go to the government. So clearly, if they would prefer that that money goes to their children or to charities, with proper planning, you can preserve that money for your family or for charities or for both.
Okay, but let's come back to my silly idea just for the fun of it for a second. If you're saving between, depending on how your assets are invested, between 25 and 54% of your estate by marrying someone on your deathbed, you could still give the same amount of 50% to your kids and give a whole bunch of money to somebody else.
There are many, many ways that people try to avoid this taxation, right? I knew somebody who said they wanted to marry their granddaughter. I mean, not for, the reasons that we think, but wanted to marry their granddaughter who's already in her 30s, because then at least the grandfather's money will roll over to the granddaughter. I mean, people look for all sorts of different ways to do it. But the main takeaway, Brian, is that people need to take some time to do planning. Everyone's been busy doing investing, and I call that kind of the offensive work of building up your assets. But you get to a certain point in your life where you have to start looking at preserving what you have, or being as looking at your income stream, how you're going to generate money in retirement, or looking at tax efficiency. How can you be more tax efficient? That's where having a conversation with a certified financial planner, a trust and estate practitioner, somebody who knows about this, would be very beneficial to make sure that your family preserves their hard-earned wealth.
I've heard that some people gift real estate and other assets to their kids before death to get out of probate, and so that they get out of some of this taxation that you're talking about. Does that work?
Again, there are some strategies where people can set up a trust, right? They can set up a trust for their family, but to actually sell the real estate to your children, that would be considered a deemed disposition. In which case, let's say a good example of this, Brian, is a cottage. Let's say people have cottages, maybe they paid $100,000 for it. And let's just say it's now worth $1.1 million. So you have $1 million gain, of which there'll be a $260,000 capital gains tax attached to that. You can't just gift it to your kids, right? And you can't just give it to them at a low market rate, right? It has to be a fair market value. Otherwise, there's a possibility where not only are you going to be taxed today, but their now cost base is going to be at the low market rate that you gave them. So therefore their tax is going to be increased exponentially. So there are things that people can do. One of the things that people can do is I specialize in tax exempt insurance strategies. So insurance is one of the last few sort of tax shelters we have left in Canada, other than your principal residence and let's say a TFSA or lottery winnings. Life insurance is a very strategic tool that can be used to preserve your estate for pennies on the dollar. And that's really what we like to talk to people about, how it can be part of their estate planning.
Okay, so let's come back to the alternative that I suggested. What if I just put my son's name on title to my house?
So as far as your residence goes, there's no tax attached to that. We don't have an inheritance tax yet here in Canada. It's coming. We don't have a wealth tax yet here in Canada. It's coming. And your principal residence is one of those 4 tax sheltered assets that we have in Canada. So there wouldn't be a tax upon him receiving it. What would happen is there would be a probate tax if, let's say, he was the beneficiary of that estate. But if you went ahead and put him on title, that asset now belongs to him as well, which means it's an investment property if he already has his own principal residence, which means he has to pay tax on the growth of that as well. And it's also subject to creditors or litigation or matrimonial, issues as well.
But when I die, he wouldn't have to pay the taxes that you're talking about.
Correct. Not on principal residences.
Okay. What if what if I had an investment property? If I had an investment property and put my son or my daughter on title, gave them as a gift during my lifetime before I died, what would be the tax implication of that?
So again, if you gave it to them from the get-go, from the day one that they bought it, they had their name on it, it belongs to them like any other asset. But for you to take that cottage that you bought for $100,000 that's now worth $1.1 million and you gift it to them, no, that would be a deemed disposition. You would have a tax bill while you're alive.
That's interesting. Okay. So what other tax strategies have you got? And what is the best time to do estate planning?
Well, the best time to do it seems like the best time is while the sun is shining, clearly. And for 30 years, I've tried to convince people that they're going to die one day or get sick or retire, and they never believed me. And it took sort of a global plague for people to be much more aware of their mortality, and as a result, their incompletions. So there's never been as good a time as there is right now for people to be focusing on, do they have a will? Is it up to date? Do they have an estate directory? Where's everything located? Digital passwords, etc. And basically looking at all their assets and being able to crystallize what's the tax today, what's the tax down the road, and can we do some planning to preserve the estate for the family? So in answer to your question, the best time to do estate planning is right now, right? Because we don't know what tomorrow brings.
Mark, if people wanted to hire you for some consultation, how much does that cost?
So the first consultation with us is completely free. There's no obligation. Because it's like going to the doctor. You can't get a prescription without a proper diagnostics, right? They call that malpractice. So getting together would be a dialogue. We can do a COVID-friendly Zoom meeting. It's basically gathering information and finding out what people want. And I know I like me, they like themselves. If we all like each other, then we would look at engaging going forward, either on a fee for service basis or through remunerations that we make through the life insurance that we procure for our clients.
And I presume it's WealthInsurance.com that they would contact you via?
Yeah, they can send an email to mark@WealthInsurance.com or just go to the website, and we'd be very, very happy to speak to them.
Some interesting ideas that we've talked about with Mark Halpern about reducing your tax basis, thinking about your estate, and giving money to charity rather than to the Canadian government that are worth some consideration. And you can contact Mark at WealthInsurance.com. We're going to take a break and come back and chat with Mark about his philanthropic efforts in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio, our Sauga 960. We're chatting tonight with Mark Halpern. Halpern. I apologize. Head of WealthInsurance.com, a wealth advisory company that specializes in estate planning and tax minimization strategies and charitable donations. And Mark, you said that you had $100 million corporate charity commitment. What's that all about?
Yeah, so before COVID hit, we had a corporate goal of wanting to create $100 million a year of new charity, either working with our clients or donors of nonprofits, or through our work with allied professionals, other lawyers, accountants, insurance, and investment people. So we finished, Brian, December 31st of 2020 at just over $61 million, which was pretty good considering we're in COVID. And that would have been helping clients appreciate that they could convert taxes into charity. So it may have been, them creating a donor advised fund or a gift and a will, or donating appreciated securities, or using life insurance to really create large gifts at small cost. So our next goal is we have a whole bunch of professional advisors, because I do a lot of speaking in industry, who have stepped forward and really want to be part of our $100 million goal. So we've kind of stepped it up a bit, Brian, and it's almost like crowdfunding. What we want to do is have an alliance of 100 allied professionals who all agree to want to create $10 million a year of charity through some of the strategies that I spoke about. And you can do the math, 100 people at $10 million, that's $1 billion of charity every year that we could be creating. So we're very excited about setting off on the course to see this actually come to fruition.
So a lot of charitable organizations do good in our society. Why would you rather the money go to them to do good in society rather than to the government to do good in society?
Well, look, we live in a fantastic country. There's no question about it. And I've traveled quite extensively, and I don't think there's any better country in the world than Canada to be living in terms of our standard of living, safety, etc. And the reality is that it's predicated on tax revenue, being able to generate money to keep and sustain all of the things we believe in, education, healthcare, etc. But the government is completely behind. They're endorsing through the Tax Act this type of strategies. Why? Because they want to encourage Canadians to give money to charity. They're not going to be capable of sustaining those charities on their own. So all part of the Tax Act, these are strategies that are available to every Canadian. So again, I believe in roads and bridges and universities, and we're taxed very highly in Canada. But if I have a choice where my taxes go at the end of the day, I'd like it to go to the charities I care about.
I agree with you, but you are taking money away from the government. So if you're successful with your $100 million charity corporate contribution, you're going to reduce the government's take by $50 million. So that's $50 million that's going to have to come from the rest of us through increased taxation, right?
Well, I don't think $50 million is going to move the dial too much, right? Maybe buy some toilet seats or a couple of sinks or something based on the procurers of government services out there. So look, we live in a great country, and it's really run by people who are working hard and contributing to the bottom line through generating revenue and tax dollars. And absolutely that has to go on, but there's a place for everybody to be charitable along the way. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And it just really suggests that after we've worked very hard during our life to become successful, we have a desire to become significant as well, Brian, and the ways to pass along some of those values to our children, who just are so inundated with, social media, and they're different than when we grew up playing road hockey, Brian. Like the way to do that is through charity or through religion. It's through passing along those values that we have social responsibility.
You say that you teach leadership and business ethic courses. Tell me about that a bit, if you could.
Yeah, for a number of years at U of T and York and Ryerson and Western, I get called in to speak on leadership and ethics, and how to run a business, and how to sort of stay above the radar, at least keep the high ground in terms of how you're conducting your business. And that's really kind of from my Jewish background, just looking at sort of some of the Jewish knowledge that we have and wisdom on how we have to set examples, and sort of try to do the best that we can by sort of being the north on the compass. Now, again, we're all humans, and not everybody is able to adjust to this. We open the papers every day and see some scary stories that are out there. But certainly if we can encourage young people to realize, or at least act where they go above the letter of the law, that's a great message to pass along.
You're involved with 3 different hospitals that would appear: sick kids, St. Joseph's and Markham Stouffville. Why healthcare is such a big interest for you?
And actually St. Mike's as well. They're starting up a new advisory board. I just find that, we're grateful. I'm so grateful that we have socialized medicine here in Canada. Again, I don't know how sustainable it is long time when half of tax revenue is going towards it. I feel that they're doing such great work, and they are really the caregivers and the frontline workers are really the unsung heroes in our society. And I unfortunately have had family members who've had to go to the hospital. Certainly having 5 children, I've been at sick kids many times with children along the way. And if we can help them to create dollars to keep the lights on, or for endowments, or for people to be able to give back to them through bequests and wills or donor advised funds, and I have the technology and the ability to do that, that makes me very proud. And it makes me it really charges me to be able to help and assist them as an allied professional.
And I understand you've recently been appointed to the board of TVO?
Yeah, TVO, it's the Legacy Planning Advisory Board. So again, like the hospitals, this is going to be a group of allied professionals that are going to assist TVO in terms of they've got tens of thousands of donors, and very loyal and also very aged. I think the average viewer, at least donor, is kind of like 70 years of age. So those conversations that I mentioned earlier, Brian, about having a choice where your estate goes to, we're going to create some wonderful programs to help buoy TVO into the future, so that when it does come 10, 20, 30 years in the future, they have some money there to keep all the lights on and not have to go out to the government to fund it, which does fund, Ontario government does fund it, and through their donors. So now they could be going ahead and looking to raise money for more creative, innovative projects, as opposed to just keeping the lights on. So it's a very exciting project to work on.
Your religion is important to you. You're president of Ashtoreth.
Ashtoreth, yeah.
Ashtoreth. You're chair of the Professional Advisory Committee of the Jewish Foundation of Greater Toronto. Why is your religion so important to you?
That's a great question. I'd say that it really stems back that we are brought into this world, Brian, not just to eat and drink and shop, right? We're actually brought into this world to create what we call it a tikkun olam, or a fixing of the world. And definitely the world needs fixing right now. I don't recognize it so much today as when I was growing up, but I'm sure you can agree that for that as well. So all of us are given certain talents, and all of us are given certain interests or passions, and we have to figure out a way to put those together to make a difference in the world. So I feel very grateful that I have a lot of talents and a love of people, a love of helping, a love of creating. At the same time, I have an understanding of tax and structures and legacies and philanthropy. And if I can marry those two together, then I can do some wonderful things in this world. And that really stems from, realizing that we're here to create social capital and have social responsibility for everybody else. It's not just each man for himself.
Mark, I want to ask you a personal question, if I could. You lost your father at an early age, and I'm very sorry for that. How did you deal with that? A lot of people that actually lose parents end up being successful because it sort of challenges them. Tell me how you dealt with the loss of your father and how old was he when he passed away?
He passed away at age 50. I was 11. I was the youngest of 4 boys at the time. And of course, it came as a shock. My only connection to death at that point was television, Kojak, any sort of cops and robbers show. But to actually have it in your own life was very difficult. And I saw how hard it was for my mother, who had to go back to work to sort of support our family. I'm grateful that my father taught us. He gave us some very good values. And, when you don't have something given to you, it means that you now have to work for it. So I'm very grateful. Me and my 3 brothers all became professionals and appreciate so much everything that we have. And at the same time, having children, Brian, as I mentioned, I have 5 kids. You want to give your kids everything you didn't have, but at the other side, you don't want to spoil them and not get them to, really put in the hard effort and work. I feel that losing that bridge made me much more independent, much more responsible, much more take charge. And, my father taught me everything I needed to know in life, even though he died when I was 11 years of age. And I feel that along the way, he's always been sort of a guiding star for me, protecting me and taking care of our family. And we hope and pray that it should continue to do so.
I know that was a personal question, but thank you for answering it, because there's so many people that actually through tragedy end up finding their strength and resilience and excelling. And not that you want the tragedy, but that you can get through it.
I think it's when you have no choice, right? Then you have to. We live in our whole lives are dealing with adversity and challenge, right? And there are things you can do something about, and there are things you can't do anything about. And we all have resources, and we have to put those resources and invest them in the things that we can do something about. The challenge is a lot of us invest those resources in things we can't do anything about. And then when we need them for the things we can do something about, unfortunately, they're not vacant. So I've had some great mentors along the way and people along in my life that have helped me to sort of get that balanced look in things and be able to deal with adversity. And I don't wish it on anybody, but it's a fact of life. And it's something that we all have to deal with, day in and day out.
And you've proven that you can get through it and get through it very successfully. So congratulations in that regard. Mark, every June, I enjoy going to Moses Znaimer's Idea City and love the speeches. I understand you made one of those presentations.
Yeah, in June of 2019, I spoke. It was one of my career highlights. I was in the disruptors category, and the topic was called the new philanthropy. And the lovely part was Moses introduced me. Why? Because Moses is my client. As a matter of fact, I can say that publicly because he tells everybody on the stage that Mark's helped me and he worked with me, and he explains how we got together and asked him the difficult questions. And it was really great. There were about 600 people there. I've been going for about the last 6 years. I'm sorry that it didn't happen because of COVID this year. And it was really great because everyone who was in that audience, so many of them came up to me afterwards and said, Mark, I didn't know any of this stuff about tax and having a choice where your money goes. And some of those people that came up to me were people that I would dream of meeting with, and here they've got professional advisors, accountants, and lawyers, and even they don't know about it. So it was really very rewarding. And if your listeners are interested, they should Google Mark Halpern Idea City, or go to our website, WealthInsurance.com, and there's the link there for watching it as well. It was really a lot of fun to do.
Mark Halpern, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. You're an inspiration, and I think that you probably are going to be extremely successful in convincing people to give money to charity rather than the tax collector. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian, and I enjoy being on your show and wish you all the success in the world. We should speak again.
I look forward to it. Stay with us. We're going to come back with some concluding comments in just a minute.